Welcome to another episode of the King's Couch. On today's episode, I have the pleasure of interviewing a good friend of mine, Chris de Jesus. He's a local musician here in San Diego, and he has an incredible story to share with us today. It's a story about courage. It's a story about redemption. It's a story about looking at life from a whole new perspective. And we'll get into that in just a second. Chris, how are you?
What a nice build-up. What's up, Sulo? Good to hang with you, man.
You too. We just got done having some lunch around the corner. Now we're in my rehearsal studio, Superior Sound in Kearny Mesa. And today's been a very interesting day. We've been able to reflect a lot about life and just the music industry. Chris and I first got connected through the boxing club where we both train at, and I've been a member there since 2015, so about 6 years now. How long have you been training there for?
I think I started there in 2004.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, so I've been there 17 years. Originally, we were at the original location, which was a grimier, dustier, more of a fight team location than the bright, shiny, happy people location they have now.
Yeah, it's definitely become a little more commercialized, but it's growing, which is good. And how many locations did the boxing club originally have, like throughout the years? They got up to about 6, right?
I think you're correct.
Yeah.
I think you're correct.
And then it dwindled down to just the one that we train at Costa Verde, right?
That is correct as well.
And now there's 3.
Now there's 3.
Yeah, so maybe one day I'll have the CEO, Artem, on this show. His story is pretty incredible.
He's got a great story.
Yeah, I mean, he started out mopping the floors and then worked his way up the ladder.
Well, also, I mean, he's from Siberia. I mean, he is the American dream, Artem.
Yeah. I've told Artem personally that he reminds me a lot of my mother, and I admire that because my mother's first generation from Finland and left the nest back in the 60s when she was 19, barely speaking English, and has turned into quite the amazing and powerful businesswoman in the integrative and holistic medical community and industry. I'm very proud of her, and now I have the honor to follow in her footsteps and
Yes, you do.
work for her. And she's not just my mother, she's my boss. But a good mother never stops being a boss.
Nice to have an example like that. It is your duty to follow her.
That's right.
Make her proud, Sulo. You already do.
I appreciate that. So, Chris, let's go back to the beginning.
All right.
Let's talk about where you were born, where you were raised, how you got into music. Let's start there.
Well, I was born in Flatbush, Brooklyn, 1963, back when New York was still New York instead of the, playground for the rich that it is now. We moved to the South Bronx where I attended elementary school and lived in a great, idyllic child upbringing. Come to find out later, it was an incredibly dangerous place, but as a child, you don't know these things.
Right.
Then my family moved us. We went from the Bronx to Staten Island, so we went from 98% black and Puerto Rican neighborhood to 98% white, idyllic country-style living. So it was a nice little culture shock. I wasn't black enough for the Bronx. I wasn't white enough for Staten Island. But it was an idyllic setting, both the Bronx and Staten Island, for different reasons. I had a great childhood, grew up, went to junior high school and high school in Staten Island, and then we moved back to Brooklyn after some family trouble that we went through. My sister passed away, and we just skedaddled, went back to Brooklyn to where we started, and that's the short version.
So at what age did you first, find your calling for music and decide that, hey, I want to be a musician?
Well, that's an interesting thing, So when I was 6 years old, the Jackson 5 ABC album came out. And, you could say they were the first boy band, but I immediately was drawn to the rhythm section of that. My mom, to keep me off the streets in the Bronx, sent me to Sunday school where they taught me how to play guitar. Unfortunately, they wouldn't teach me left-handed because I'm a recovering Catholic, and I had to switch to right-handed because of the nuns there. So,
when you say recovering Catholic, I don't know if our listeners or even myself really fully understands what that means.
I am not fond of organized religion.
Okay.
And I'm especially not fond of the Archdiocese in New York City, specifically the Catholic priests and nuns that, people like us grew up with from back in the 60s and the 70s and really the 80s. A lot came out much later. Nothing happened to me, but a lot came out much later with respect to child abuse. And that's just part of why I'm not fond of religion. So when I say I'm a recovering Catholic, it's not to denigrate Catholicism as much as to express that I'm not fond of organized religion of any kind.
Fair enough. And, on the King's Couch, this is a free format show, so you can express whatever's on your mind and whatever belief system you have. I'm not a big fan of organized religion myself, personally. I was raised very spiritually, but I was raised to have an open mind and to question everything. And we had this discussion at lunch a little bit about that. And I've actually had some guests on the show that have told me off mic some crazy experiences that they've helped expose on the East Coast in some of the churches and different, religious organizations. So
boy, that escalated quickly. You asked me about music, and all of a sudden, here we go. My fault. So
that's okay.
I got the record, ABC Jackson 5, and didn't know it at the time, but was really attracted to the groove and the drummer and bass player, legendary bass player of Motown, all over that record, along with a couple other bass players who I've become fond of as well. Attracted me to the groove.
Right.
And I became obsessed with it, Later on, when we moved to Staten Island, I began playing upright bass back when they had orchestras in public schools, So I'm glad I grew up when I did. And evidently, the way I remember it is I was the kid with the biggest hands, so I got selected to play the bass fiddle.
Right.
And that was my introduction to classical music and reading music and harmony. And so to answer your earlier question before I escalated on a rant, that was my entrance into music. Began with the nuns at Catholic school teaching me guitar. Then it was the Jackson 5 just making a perfect record called ABC. And then my introduction into the school orchestra in third grade. I'm grateful for all three, and I don't know how my life would have turned out without music.
Yeah, I feel the same exact way. I mean, my father is a big influence on the man I became in the music industry. He took me away from the radio and introduced me to his vinyl collection and said, don't listen to these top 40 singles. They get played out anyways, and all the good stuff is on the rest of the album anyways, for the most part. And, when you find a connection through music, everyone's got their favorite genre, of course, but I'll never, as long as I live, forget the fact that my father educated me and said it's okay to go through these phases where you want to listen to just, rock, or punk or metal or whatever, or hip hop or rap, but, keep your mind open musically, because a lot of these people that play the type of music that you like, they don't just listen to that. They listen to everything, and they have a lot of education behind, what they write or what they listen to, or just period, okay, let me see here. How old were you when you first decided you wanted to start playing bass? Because that's your primary instrument, right?
It is. I was in the 3rd grade when I got selected to play the upright bass in the school orchestra.
Okay.
I played it all the way through college.
And you continued to play in bands here in San Diego once you moved out here, up until what year?
April 3rd, 2019 is when I became unable to play music the way I was previously.
And we'll get into that. That's a little foreshadowing of what's to come. Mm-hmm. But we're still on the East Coast chapter of your story. So let's.
I moved to California in 1988. I was recruited to build and do some speaking to a sales team in Las Vegas first, and then Newport Beach. And it was supposed to be a 2-week gig, and 2 weeks became 2 months, became 6 months, and quite frankly, I'd never left. So California became my permanent home. I lived first in the guest house in Ranchos Palos Verdes, then moved into the valley up in Reseda, then started gradually making my way south. First, Laguna Beach, and a stop in Riverside, South Riverside County in Murrieta, Temecula, and then finally here in San Diego.
And how long have you been in San Diego for?
I moved to San Diego in 93.
Oh, wow. So this is the longest place that you've called home.
It is.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. And there's a certain stigma about San Diego.
Is there?
I believe so. I love San Diego. San Diego is home to me. I feel connected here. I feel grounded here. I love to travel. I've been all over the country, all over the world, but I can't imagine myself living anywhere else. Like, even though when I leave Finland or my favorite Hawaiian island, Kauai, I don't want to come back home. But eventually when I do come back, it's just there's a certain level of energy out here that that is home for me, and it takes a while for some people, and some people never truly find, as they say, home is where the heart is.
Were you born here?
I was actually born in Phoenix, but I might as well have been because my parents had the California dream and moved out here in 1982 when I was 2 years old. And then my sister was born 3 years later. Or sorry, what am I saying? 2 years later. No, wait, a year later. Sorry, in 1983. My sister's 3 years younger than me. I forgot how old she was for a second. But they've never left. My sister has bounced around for college, and she just took a position in Starkville, Mississippi, at a university out there as a college professor in sociology.
Interesting.
Yeah. But I've never had a desire to move, and neither have my parents.
I could say some kind of snarky, comment about Mississippi might need more sociology teachers and college professors in general.
So my sister eventually will be on the show. I call her Freedom Writers because she's very about human rights, period. That's the easiest way to really generalize what she stands up for and what she stands for as a human being. She's worked at Rikers Point, rehabilitating juveniles back into society once they turn 18. She's worked as a social worker. She likes to date, different races. She's been through so many different interesting encounters, from living in New York to living in Hawaii to now living in Mississippi. And she's a very strong-willed person. I remember when she first came back from the East Coast, and I made some funny remark to her. She put my ass in check real hard. And I was like, what the hell happened to you? It's like you joined the military or some shit. But she toughened up. And she's always had that strong will about her. So, love my sister. Shout out to you, Sana, if you're listening.
Love mine too. Shout out to Julie.
Family is, not everybody has it, and we're fortunate. And I feel very, very fortunate. A lot of gratitude for my sister and, my parents. My parents are like a interesting yin and yang balance, total opposite of each other. But I was...
Don't I know that?
Yep. Yeah, everyone's got a story to tell. So let's continue on with yours, Chris.
Okay.
So we've taken you from New York to San Diego. You moved here in San Diego in 93. Mm-hmm. What was the first band you started playing with here in San Diego? Do you remember?
It was a band called Blue Heaven Green. We were awful. Terrible.
And how old were you back then?
I don't even remember. Let's see, 93. I must have been 29 or 30.
Okay.
And then, but Blue Heaven Green rehearsed at a studio called DML in Escondido, where I met two crazy Queens guys who you're very fond of, or were very fond of, Big Vinny and Don Lithgow.
But unfortunately, both of them have passed away, and Don being the most recent. So shout out to Don and Big Vinny, Vince Crudo. And Vinny was my mentor. He's the reason why I got into the music industry. I mean, I got my foot in the door, but he pushed me all the way through the door.
Well, Don was great. He was like, you know what? You can play the hell out of that bass, but your band really sucks. I was like, yeah, I know.
That's so Don Lithgow.
He's like, I mean, really, what are you playing with these guys for? They suck. And then he introduced me to Jeff Paremba and his previous girl, Leanne, and eventually Jeff Winkler. And we formed a band called Bigger to Better in 93, 94. Played together for some years. It's fantastic. I've been blessed to play with a whole bunch of people more talented than myself, and Jeff Paremba and Jeff Winkler are two of those people. And
I actually used to manage a band that Jeff was in called Tall, and he was the last guitar player in that lineup before they eventually disbanded. And man, that guy is so soulful, and he's definitely has a gift. And he's played with like Bang Tango and
yep,
a bunch of different 80s bands.
Yes.
He's an amazing session player. And it's interesting because all the Tall guys have moved out to, the primary ones have moved out to Texas. Kurt Otto is the only Tall drummer I can remember that didn't leave San Diego. He's still out here. I don't know if you know him, but amazing drummer as well. He was in...
I have a hard time remembering names. But
yeah, he was in Rich Kid, and I'm trying to remember some other bands. Rich Farville.
Yeah, I know Rich Farville.
Rich is killing it with his short films. He's another guest on my list. I have a pretty extensive list of
great
people.
Filmmaker.
Yeah, an amazing musician too, and just a stand-up guy all around. This music scene is very vast, but it's very small at the same time. So it's interesting how when we met, when was it, probably about 4 years ago or so, the boxing club through Ricky Guro. Shout out to Ricky.
What's up, Ricky?
Ricky was the former GM at the boxing club, and the reason why I signed up there, I remember the first day I walked in, and my roommate had told me about the place, and I already knew that the boxing club was there. But Ricky didn't sell me. He was just real and down to earth, and you feel a certain level of energy when you walk into a place, and you know sometimes just right off the bat that this is going to be the right fit. I didn't know 6 years later I'd still be there, but it's the most supportive community for any multifaceted gym I've ever seen. There's no egos. It doesn't matter who you are, what skill level you're at in your level of fitness game. You're welcome. And Artem uses that word family, not loosely. He stands by that word. Everybody there is family. And, you know, I always have the hashtag TBC and then the number 4 life. TBC for life. And, you know, I wish them nothing but the best. And because of Ricky, that's how we met.
That is how we
Yeah,
met.
and
Ricky was telling me about you. You had the recording studio still at the time. And he thought we should meet. We knew at the same friendly circles for many, many years, you know, through the heavy metal and hard rock communities and the same clubs that found out later you were the promoter in. I think you probably promoted a show or two of ours from a band I played in. We opened up for 30 Seconds of Mars to Mars at Brick by Brick.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that was one of your shows.
that was like early in my career there. Like I want to say 2002, 2003, around that time. Maybe
somewhere in there.
Yeah, between like 2002 to 2004, somewhere around that range. Because we booked 30 Seconds to Mars a handful of times. Good band. Jared Leto wasn't much of a talker. He kind of brushed me off.
Oh, you're trying to be nice now.
Yeah.
So I don't have to be nice.
Yeah. Well, you don't have to be. This is a free format show. He was kind of a prick. I'll just say right there. I know. And, you know, just for a quick second, talking about actors, you know, that are trying to make it in music at the same time. They were 50-50. You never knew what you were going to get. Sometimes they were the nicest guys in the world and easier to deal with than other national acts that would come through. And sometimes they were the biggest assholes in the world. And, you know, I never really let that get to me. I just kind of like, whatever, you know, to each his own. I'm diplomatic, and that's the way I was taught by Max, my boss, by Big Vinny. Big Vinny was like my Yoda, even though he looked more like Fred Flintstone and talked like Rodney Dangerfield. But he was definitely a character, and as much as he was a jackass himself, he was very wise and a hell of a fucking musician and an audio engineer. And Don Lithgow too, you know, but their approach was so real, and a lot of people could not handle that. You know what I mean? Like, who wants to go and record at a studio and then have the engineer be like, wait, hold on a second. Give me the fucking guitar. You can't play a lead to save your life. Here, I'll do it. That was Don Lithgow.
Yeah. I met him saying, yeah, you can play the bass, but your band sucks.
Yeah.
I appreciated it because I knew it to be true.
And Vinny, sound checking bands would be like, next hack. All right, like, you suck. All right, that's enough for you. Like, I've never heard a sound guy talk shit to every single band he was sound checking. And he was so funny and full of life. And I'm glad that you got to know him longer than I did. You know what I mean? He passed away, unfortunately, 2 months before I opened up Iacon Sound. And yeah, I think there's not a day that doesn't pass I don't think about Vinny. And his name comes up a lot in this industry. He was very well loved.
Like right now.
Yeah, exactly. So we left off on your story in the 90s. So let's fast forward a little bit and let's talk about some of the other bands that you're in, genres of music that you've covered and played, and, you know, why you left, you know, and put down the bass.
Well, you know, I grew up in an era where everybody wanted to be a rock star, and I was one of those guys, you know, and rock and roll music meant something in the culture. It was the dominant part of, popular culture when I grew up. It can't even get a cup of coffee on the Grammys now. It meant something to be a rock musician when I was growing up. And I wanted to be one of them, just like all of them, just like my whole generation did. But I'm also very happy that I had some musical education that taught me how to read, taught me how to play, correctly. Let's just say that's not the right word. But because when it became evident that, you're not going to be a rock star, you're not going to, tour the world and sell out stadiums, what does a guy do after that? Well, I still enjoyed music.
That's why a lot of these bands reform, because that's all they have as a paycheck. That's all they know.
Well, I'm just grateful because, somewhere along the line, in my formative years in high school, I met a guy, best musician I've ever played with. His name was David Sokol, and he was a guy that could pick up any instrument and play it.
Is he still with us?
No, he's no longer with us. But he was the trombone player in our high school jazz band and in our orchestra. And if you know anything about trombone, those guys are always the best musicians in the band. Trombone and the cellist, those two. So Dave introduced me to Jaco Pastorius. Introduced me to the music of Jaco Pastorius, who was, prior to that, the formative bass player that influenced me was James Jamerson from Motown, Funk Brothers. And I liked, Chris Squire of Yes. I liked John Entwistle from The Who. I liked rock and roll bass players, but they couldn't play like James Jamerson. They were more famous, but they couldn't play like him. And I knew it then. And then when I heard the Heavy Weather album from Weather Report and Jaco Pastorius's solo record, my mind just got completely blown. And so I thank Dave Sokol for that. And he was just the guy that opened that side of my musical vocabulary, I guess you could say.
That's a good way of putting it.
And by that time, I could already read music. So when it became apparent that, look, you're not going to be a rock star, but you still enjoy music, I started playing in big band orchestras. I played in small jazz combos. I played with some neo-soul cats that were out on the scene. I was able to get work, and I was able to play in cover bands for many, many years and work every weekend for a long, long time, and then play with a couple of great Americana songwriters who, shared the stage with some very, very famous people, let's just say that, opening up for some very, very famous people who have influenced American music and the American songbook. And, I'm grateful that I can understand the impact that these other alternative genres that were not rock and roll had on American culture. And I am still extremely motivated. I can't really play yet, maybe a little bit, but I'm extremely motivated by, the jazz, the blues, the soul music greats that often get overlooked and never get enough credit for their contribution to society. So you can't listen to hip-hop music without hearing their samples of their beats.
Oh, yeah, definitely. At least a good hip-hop song or artist. That's very true. What was it for you that made you lose the drive to want to play in bands?
Well, on April 3rd, 2019, I had a massive stroke. And I was completely paralyzed on the left side of my body. So in one day, and, we haven't talked about this, but I've been a martial artist my whole life. I've been, pretty agile, pretty decent athlete, pretty good martial artist. And in one day I lost, the ability to do martial arts, the ability to do music, and it eventually cost me my business, which I had at the time.
What kind of business?
It was a screen printing, I guess you could say factory. It's a pretty big place.
Oh, wow.
We did, we were one of the biggest places here in San Diego.
What was the name of the company?
It was called Breakout Creative.
Oh, yeah.
And I owned...
That was you?
That was my company.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And I owned another company called Axis Productions, which was a print brokerage house. So, yeah, man, I had a stroke. It changed everything.
And that was only 1 out of 2, right? That was the first stroke. You had 2, didn't you?
No, I only
had
one.
Oh, okay.
I only had 1 stroke, thank God. You don't want it to happen
right.
again.
Yeah, I mean, one's enough for anybody, but I could have sworn that you said 2. What were you doing when you had the stroke?
Interesting. Well...
And this is a 2-part question. And were you under high amounts of stress?
I was under real amounts of stress. I had purchased Breakout Creative Company, and I'll just say it. I tripled the revenue of the company in pretty short order, but we weren't profitable. It was a very, very difficult time in my life.
Okay.
And it was getting more and more difficult for a lot of reasons. However, I woke up on the morning of April 3rd, 2019, and I just noticed that I was starting to walk a little funny just in getting ready to go to work in my house.
So you had early signs.
I was probably having the stroke right at that point. I noticed I could hardly hold up. The coffee cup was too heavy.
Oh, shit.
But I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know it was a stroke. My face wasn't drooping. I wasn't confused. My language never suffered. So, being the meathead, tough son of a bitch that I am, I'm just gonna go through this. I'm just gonna continue with my day. I got in my car and drove my ass to work.
Oh, shit.
And
knowingly that something was not right. And you should probably be driving yourself to a hospital or a doctor's office, not work.
And gradually, over the next 3 hours, my employees all were like, "Man, something's wrong with you. You might be dehydrated. Maybe you need to eat. Maybe you're low on potassium." Everybody was a doctor, right? But they were right. I was walking into walls at this point. I was having trouble. I totally lost motor function on the left side of my body. I couldn't type. I couldn't write. And they're like, "Do yourself a favor. Go get something to eat. And if you're not any better, go to the hospital." So I left work and I drove myself to get lunch.
Oh, shit.
Believe it or not.
You're a stubborn son of a bitch on top of that.
Come to find out later, when I got to the hospital, I'll tell you that story in a moment. So I went to lunch, and then by that time, there was just no way. Something was very, very, very wrong. But on my radar, I still wasn't thinking stroke, you know? I just didn't know what it was. So,
what did you have any level of fear set in at one point where you were starting to really become concerned about your health?
No. I was like, something's wrong. They'll figure it out. So the lunch I drove myself to, there was an urgent care 3 blocks away, and I said, "You know what? I'm just going to drive to urgent care." By the time I got to urgent care, I couldn't walk anymore. I couldn't control my foot. I was having a stroke and not knowing it. Mm-hmm. And as soon as I got to the doorway, I walk into the urgent care. There was 20 people ahead of me, and the staff looked at me, and they knew right away.
They could just tell.
They could just tell right away what happened to me. They said, you had a stroke. And I just cut the line and went straight to the back, and they began diagnosing me. Before I knew it, the EMTs were on me. The doctor was in. They knew immediately, and they said, yeah, you had a stroke. So from there, I got ambulanced over to UCSD, mm-hmm. and it was confirmed there. And by that time, I couldn't hold a spoon. Not only could I not walk, I could barely sit up in my chair at that point.
Oh, my God.
So it was scary. It was scary. And, the word stroke is a scary word.
Yeah, and a lot of people think stroke is just something that, will temporarily disable you right there on the spot. You can literally be walking around like you did, having a stroke all day or already had the stroke.
From 6 a.m. in the morning till 1 p.m. in the afternoon. And by 2 p.m. in the afternoon, I could not walk another step. I could not hold a spoon. I could not turn a doorknob. I could not do anything.
My God.
So then I got scared.
Right. So then the fear starts setting in at that point.
I'm sitting in the hospital, and, the doctor at the emergency room, they wheel me in. They give me a bed, They go through my vitals and everything, and then all of a sudden there's this, 45 minutes or so where nobody's, I'm just in the room by myself. Now I'm thinking, oh, shit, what's going to happen to me?
Right.
And all these thoughts go through your head. Am I ever going to be able to play the bass again? Am I ever going to be able to play guitar, play piano? Am I ever going to be able to walk? Come to find out, what I really should have been asking myself is a lot more basic questions than that. Like, am I ever going to be able to sit up again? Some people don't. Some people have a stroke and, don't live through it. I come to find out it's the third leading cause of death in America, and it's, a very, very dangerous thing.
That's what killed Vinny? Diabetic?
Ultimately, yeah.
Yeah, ultimately, he was in his sleep.
Yeah, now luckily, maybe partly because of the boxing club and my interest in martial arts and other things, I've been in pretty decent shape most of my life. Not bodybuilding shape, but active and athletic and mindful of my health, with the exception of the ultimate thing that hurt me more than anything, which was smoking cigarettes.
And how long have you been a cigarette smoker for?
I had been a cigarette smoker since I was 20. So it was 35 years.
And like, how heavy of a smoker were you?
Pack a day.
Pack a day, yeah. That's about how standard I was. Mm-hmm. And it's like they say, Vinny taught me a very valuable lesson near his ultimate demise, because he knew what was coming. He told me a year and a half before he passed, he probably only had about 4 good years left in him, and to treat your body right, follow in your mom's footsteps. I should have listened to your mom and everyone else around me saying, hey, you can't drink like a fish, do drugs, and eat like shit. It's eventually going to catch up to you. My mom was telling him back when I first met him, all those years back, 10 years prior, that, hey, you have early signs of diabetes. She saw it. And when the diabetes took away his vision,
I remember.
I'll never forget that conversation, because it was one of the few times he looked scared, and Vinny was fearless. And I think about that every time I want to smoke a cigarette. To be honest with you, I just hit a year marker the other day, and
Congratulations.
I've quit a million times in the past before. Always gone back. Booze has always brought me back. Nothing is better than enjoying a beer or a cocktail at a show, and occasionally going outside and having that cigarette. You know what I mean? Or I was more of a social smoker, but then it led to like a neurotic habit, and I got to give you kudos, Chris, for, having the courage to admit that a lot of that had a factor into that. And
it has to be. It's the only, it's the box that was left unchecked, Now, my family, nobody can say why you have it or how. Doctor can't tell you had a stroke because you did X. It was probably heredity as much as anything. My sister died of an aneurysm.
Oh, wow. So it's a genetic thing in your family too?
It
possibly.
More than likely, all strokes are.
Right.
But they are preventable. Mm-hmm. And the thing that I could have done to prevent it was not smoke. All the other boxes I had checked. Mm. I was pretty healthy. I had stopped doing drugs. And I was a heavy drug user early
what was your
in my life.
Poison of choice?
It didn't matter. I did it all.
Oh, so you were one of those musicians.
Yeah. But at 25, by the time I moved to California, all that went away.
Right. What made you drop all that shit once you got out here?
I honestly don't know. I just didn't like the way I felt. I didn't like, how drugs made me feel anymore.
Did you ever? I used to do this, and this is what made me kind of clean up my act. Is when I was battling one of the many times I've battled depression, I woke up and looked in the mirror, and I didn't like who I saw anymore.
Oh, I've had those days.
And I wrote a song off one of our albums. The first album you heard from us called "Take Back the Streets." It's a song called "Lost in Transition." And when I say mirrored in time, it's like I felt like I was hitting pause and just staring at a reflection of myself that was just stuck in time. And that's where I came up with the phrase mirrored in time, because I didn't know where I was going. And I was kind of fearing that, if I didn't clean up my act, I may end up, in an early grave.
Well, I was having this talk with a coworker this week, expressing that I am glad that I did not grow up in the age of prescription opiates, which is basically legal heroin. And I grew up in New York City before crack hit. But have I done cocaine? More than I should have. Have I done heroin? More than I should have. Have I done every drug that was available then? I absolutely did more than I should have. But I am glad I've had friends suffer through this opiate epidemic. And it's ugly.
Yeah.
And it's dangerous. And I said I think it's the most dangerous drug epidemic that I've seen in my lifetime. And I've seen them all. I lived through the crack era, but I had moved out of New York by the time it really took out New York. And, prior to that, there was freebase, there was cocaine. There were drugs around long before these two epidemics, but the opioid epidemic is a heartbreaking epidemic. It's the worst I've seen.
Really?
I've seen people suffer from it and, lose their family. I've known of people in social circles that have died from it, as I'm sure we all have.
Oh, yeah.
And one of my very, very, very best friends is a survivor that kicked and got his life back and is doing great.
That's great.
But those stories are rare.
That's true. I've seen drugs destroy a lot of lives working in the music industry. My mom even told me once, early on in my career, she's like, I don't know how you deal with all this death around you. In my entire lifetime, and I know a lot of people, I've never had to deal with that much death. And I looked at her, I was like, well, we come from different worlds. These people that you know take better care of themselves. In my world, they don't. You know, and I don't know how else to really put it that bluntly, but
death is not something you should ever get used to.
No. It's inevitable. It's a part of life. We all have to. We can't live in fear about one day just dropping dead or getting hit by a car. When our number's up, our number's up. And people like Vinny, I use him as a reference a lot because he was a clear, good reminder of that. And that conversation I was talking about earlier about how he knew he was on borrowed time at this point. And when you lose something as important as your vision or let's say your hearing, like or you, for example, having a life traumatizing event like a stroke where you could have died, you know, it either wakes you up or it doesn't.
Many people die from stroke.
Yeah.
But it gets worse. Many people that have a stroke and have a chance to make it don't. I was made aware of the 3 bridges that you have to cross. In the first 30 days, they leave you in the hospital. I was in the hospital for close to 60 days because they just want to make sure that you're not going to have another one.
Right.
That's the first bridge. The second bridge is they want to make sure that you take your rehab seriously because most people don't. So that's the second bridge. Begin your rehab and take it seriously. Most people don't. Most people at that point begin to give up. And believe me, I understand why. I lived through that too, you know. When a nice lady has to help you wipe your ass, it's not the most fun you ever had, you know. When somebody has to help you take a shower to keep you from falling and breaking your hip, it's not the most fun you'll ever have. So the second bridge is to take your rehab seriously, and at 30 and 60 and 90 days, you're really not knowing. Nobody knows what you're going to get back or what you're not. Or what you're not going to get. There's no way that doctors know and to tell you. And then the third bridge is at the 6-month mark. I have come to find out that the people that don't take their rehab seriously, the incidences of suicide are through the roof.
Really?
Like higher than, you know, any other demographic. People who've had a stroke who don't take their rehab seriously and finish their rehab attempt suicide at an alarmingly high rate. And that's unacceptable. It was unacceptable for me, at least. So, and you know, because you had met me before I had the stroke.
Like shortly before.
Mm-hmm.
I remember meeting you, and I thought my first impression, once we started talking music shop, instantly I liked you. I was like, I fucking love this dude. He's such a stand-up, nice guy, straightforward guy. We roll in the same circle in the music industry. We get each other. We're on the same wavelength. And still to this day. And then I didn't see you for a long period of time. You disappeared. Yeah. And that happens a lot in my life. And I'm used to that. And then one day I see you at the gym. And right off the bat, you're probably wondering why you haven't seen much of me lately. And you told me what happened. And fast forward to right now at this moment, us recording this podcast, I just have to say this on the record that I am so proud of you, Chris.
Thank you, man.
Like, you are such an inspiration to everyone around you, especially people that know your story, because you are proof in the pudding that mind over matter, you can accomplish almost anything. A good analogy, since we're talking about, you know, the boxing club in the gym, is that boxer from the 80s that got in a car accident and broke his neck. And he made a comeback. I can't remember the guy's name off the top of my head, but there was a biopic that came out a couple of years about him. And that's when I learned about that story. But you hear miraculous stories about people recovering from severe injuries, don't ever let a doctor or someone tell you that you can't do this, can't do that. Yeah, maybe medically you won't be able to walk or have full function of something. But at the same time, if you get in that depressed state, like you were talking about suicide rates, that's where you entered that dark zone. And you have always been an optimist. You have always been strong-willed. And I watched your progress in the gym, and every day that goes by, you're just getting stronger and stronger and quicker and faster and more fluid. And anyone that's listening out there that is going through a tough time, dealing with some kind of physical handicap, especially my buddy Travis Wheeler, who was just in an accident last month on tour with POD. Their RV was rear-ended by a semi on the road, and the band was seriously injured. They all made it out with their lives, but Travis had his leg and arm crushed. And I just posted a video on my Facebook wall. I don't know if you saw it, Chris, like yesterday, because I just saw that video, and I was blown away. I didn't realize his injuries were so severe. He basically had to have part of his foot amputated.
Oh.
And then the other foot, he lost some toes, and his arm was severely crushed. But watching how strong he was talking about this and how this isn't the end, this is, I will make a comeback. And I've seen this happen with another band in that same genre that happened a few years ago. The whole band was severely injured. And they just recently, I think right before the pandemic, had a reunion concert. And it was pretty inspiring to see, like physically handicapped, a band goes from being perfectly normal, gets in a traumatic injury like that, and get up there and just tear it up. You know what I mean? So I guess my whole point of what I'm trying to get across to all the listeners out there is that you're just another shining example of someone that is on the right road to recovery. And if you can be an inspiration for somebody else, I hope if anyone takes away your message is that there is hope.
Anything's possible. We all have a choice every day, We talked earlier today. I grew up white in America, the richest company in the world. I've enjoyed white privilege my whole life. It's like, I had a stroke. It's a terrible thing, My sister died. My brother died. My parents buried my older sister and my older brother. They shouldn't have to do that. I wanted to make damn sure they didn't have to do that again with me. But we live in the greatest country in the world. My complexion has allowed me more opportunities than I've ever deserved. People like you and I should not be bitching about our circumstance.
Exactly.
It is a ridiculous thing.
And we've seen a lot of that in the last year and a half during this pandemic. A month into this pandemic and quarantine, people couldn't stomach the fact that this was real, and people were bitching about not being able to do things like go to a bar and taking, those things for granted, which I never have.
Don't even get me started.
Yeah, we're not going to go down that road.
I'm afraid. I'm still sketched out and afraid to go to. I'd love to go to a music festival. I'd love to go see that, that stadium tour. I'm not ready for all that yet.
Yeah, you're no offense, you're a little more at risk than someone in my position, and I completely respect that. And like I said, I got to give you kudos, man. Like you're kicking ass in the gym. You've got your diet under control, and it's inspired me to get off my lazy ass, even though I've battled a little bit of depression this year. I think of you from time to time too, like when I get into that zone. Or I think of people like Kane or Vinny or others, and that's partially what got me back into the rhythm of things. This has been a trialing summer for me, but just like you said, this is why the tagline of this show is everyone's got a story to tell. Everyone's been through a different journey and different path in life, and life wasn't designed to be easy. I emphasize that.
We hit the jackpot, bro.
Yeah, we did.
We hit the jackpot. we're born white in America, you know? So it's like it would be a shame of us to fold, cut, and run
Right.
when we get challenged the way other people are challenged every day.
The segregation, adversity that those people face. I can't imagine what that feels like. And I have friends that I've witnessed it right in front of my face in the music industry. The level of like prejudice, you know, whether you're gay or straight or bi or whatever, or whether you're black or white or Asian, it's fucked up. I'm just going to say it right now. Like, if you're racist and you're listening to this, like, I hope you take away some positivity out of this, you know, because I'm not going to sing to your level.
That's right.
You know?
I'm not perfect. You know, I had to take a unconscious bias test recently and diversity course recently for work. And, you know, I'm far from perfect, but I am aware that I hit the jackpot. Right. And I have no need to bitch and whine about my circumstance. Nobody wants to hear it anyway, first of all. Very few people can really help you, second of all.
Right.
Third of all, you know, we can dig ourselves out of damn near anything. You know, whatever you believe, God, universe, science, doesn't matter. Whoever gave me another opportunity.
Well, I'm glad that they did give you that opportunity and that you're still here and that you're able to spread this message of positivity, because that's what the world needs more of. People like you, people like us. You know what I mean? Not to toot our own horns, but there's a lot of chaos in the world right now. You know? There really is.
I've never looked at myself like I'm the most talented guy. I've never been the best athlete. I've never been the strongest guy. I've never been the smartest guy. But I am a little of all of those things. And if there's one thing my mom gave me, it's grit. You know?
And you take grit classes. That's funny. You said that word.
If there's something that my mom gave me, is Brooklyn Irish toughness. You know, my dad's pretty damn tough too.
I met your father. Speaking of tough, I watched him train with our trainer, Kane. Mm-hmm. He's a tough son of a bitch.
85 years old.
Yeah,
Who takes up boxing at 77?
That guy, you look at his eyes, he looks like he's 23 years old. Like a nice guy. Gave me a firm-ass handshake, too.
Luckily, I'm from good stock. Luckily, you know, while I've had some bumps along the road, there are some things that I've done that I'm not proud of, and I'm certainly embarrassed of others. I've had run-ins. I've had setbacks, you know, that I deserved. Run-ins with the law that I deserved. Run-ins with my vices that should have did worse to me than it did. But I survived it all.
And you don't live in regret.
No, I don't live in regret. I've had a nice life with a hell of a story, much too layered to tell in this podcast.
Right.
But, you know, I am grateful that I have an opportunity to lead the rest of my life to create what I am to be. And not everybody has that opportunity.
It's true.
You know, John Singleton had the same stroke I had. He never woke up back up.
I was actually getting this so ironic that you brought that up.
Luke Perry.
Because I was going to bring up when we were talking about, you know, the epidemic of opiates and crack and cocaine. I was going to be like, hey, have you seen the show Snowfall? And that was the last project that John Singleton was working on, and he died during the production of that.
Luke Perry from Beverly Hills 90210, he died of a stroke. Yep. Dr. Dre had an aneurysm recently while he was in the hospital. Some thugs robbed his house. Can you believe that?
That's fucked up.
So, look, Norman Vincent Peale in 1935 said, the only people that don't have problems are buried in the cemetery. You should be thankful for the problems that you have because it's the proof that you're still alive.
Eloquently put. And now we're going to wrap up this podcast. I typically say this is the portion of the show where our guest leaves the viewer with a positive affirmation, catchphrase, or message. And you just said that. You beat me to the punch. It's been a pleasure having you on the show, Chris.
It's great hanging with you, Sulo. It's great every time I see you. But today was fun, especially fun. For your listeners to know, we just had some great ramen and sushi and gyoza before we started here. We've got a nice bottle, a 12-year-old single malt scotch, and it was a great afternoon, Labor Day weekend.
Yeah, definitely. And we're going to enjoy the rest of this late afternoon. I think we're into the evening now. This day kind of zoomed by on us. But yeah, that wraps up another episode of The King's Couch. I'm your host, Sulo King.
I'm Chris De Jesus.
And all we want is for you guys to live life to its fullest and stay radical.
Stay radical.
All right. We'll catch you next time.
Take it easy.